Welcome to Realms Unknown, a sci-fi and fantasy podcast brought to you by the Bugle. The vast city bulges under the night sky, leaking light and steam from its pores like an uncomfortable toad with a terrible disease, beautiful and squat, circled fly-like about with the lazy circles of the vast delivery zeppelins awaiting their docking slots. The city is split by a dark strip 2/3 along its hulking breadth, a strip where no lights twinkle, no cogboats or steamships dare wend their way up the river at night, despite the heaving daytime traffic. If you're not moored by dusk, a writhing tentacle is likely to slither its muscular length around your hull like a teenager going for a grope in a stroboscope theatre, and you'll be pulled down for squid shark or kraken fodder. That's at best. At worst, you'll survive if what comes out of those dark mutagenic waters can be considered alive. Certainly those things are of the old world and not of science. Sometimes a gleam of moonlight will strike the river right to make it gleam silver in the dark, but less than you would think. That sluggishly moving flow seems to drink light. The city split along that dark line, more lights in the smaller quadrant, rich town able to burn its gas lamps in every ballroom and lecture hall, every luxurious panopticon blazing away in gleeful excess, neat streets marked out by regular lamp posts. The rest of the city is a more haphazard spread of light, drum fires, taverns, spell globes, witch lights, and the occasional nightclub or casino, its entrance blaring light and sound luring in its victims with the promise of numbing their troubles. Perched on a high balcony far above Richtown, Galatea adjusted her goggles and rubbed her cramping hands against her worn leather jodhpurs, seeing her side of the river swaying woozily with the movement of the tower she had just climbed. The delicate balance of clockwork, spells, and balloonery that held these metal skyscrapers aloft didn't bear thinking about, especially as she was about to introduce strange magic. She hesitated one more second and pulled a sheet of paper from her hip pocket. She read the word, whispering it in her rusty voice, turning to the blue glowing lock, and then spoke it aloud. She paused. The lock clicked and went suddenly dark. The door swung open. "Realm," she murmured to herself. Realms Unknown. Yeah, that's right. You've just entered Realms Unknown, a weekly speculative fiction podcast brought to you by the Bugle, in which we discuss science fiction and fantasy tropes, the newest news, our favorite old shows, books, games, and more. I am your host, published author and comedian Alice Fraser, and my companion on this journey, the alpha to my omega, the word to my word, the other word to my other word. It's Myq Kaplan. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm delighted to have you. Our subgenre deep dive for the day will be words of power. So we're going to talk about sci-fi and fantasy in which works play with words in interesting and exciting ways. As always, we have recommendations from our wonderful audience. But first, bit of news. And normally we do sci-fi and fantasy news, but there's been a heist at the Louvre in which precious jewels have been stolen, and that feels like a plot point in like 90% of all fiction. How are you feeling about the Louvre heist?
I love it. Truly, I have not delved deeply into it, but it does really seem kind of, now you see me, magic heist. I love heist as a genre as well. And I mean, when heist is also involved, like these could have been magic gems that were stolen. We don't know. I don't know what the gems are, or perhaps those were decoys. Who can say? I like my heists fictional generally. The only real life heist I would like is if, like Robin Hood on a large scale, like, socialism heisted all the money from capitalism and then ta-da. But I love a fictional heist because usually the people, you're rooting for the good guys against the big, like the people who have the stuff. They're bad. But in life, I don't know what the Louvre's deal is. I don't know. I mean, some museums took stuff that they shouldn't have had. So if it's like, were these indigenous gems that indigenous thieves stole in the night or the day? I think it was the day. Whoever did it, great job. But I mean, give it back unless it was yours to begin with. I don't know. I haven't really followed.
That's our news section for today, bringing us to our ad section. Your ad section now, because you can't be what you can't buy. Are you tired of catastrophic mispronunciations? That subtle difference between ignis, a warm flame, and ignis, a fireball capable of vaporizing your alchemy lab, is everything. Don't leave your magical practice to chance. Introducing the Lexicaster Veracity Resonator and Passive Aggressivation Matrix. Simply an exoskeletal brain that you can install in your nearest grandmother. The Lexicaster Veracity Resonator and Passive Aggressivation Matrix will clear its throat meaningfully if you're about to say the wrong thing in your spell, saving you from opening a vast chasm into the abyss 9 out of 10 times. That's the Lexicaster Veracity Resonator and Passive Aggressivation Matrix, available now. Has everything gone wrong? The Lich is laughing, the portal is collapsing, the demon you summoned is unimpressed with your offering. You've run out of words and you're about to run out of time. Pull the tab on an X-out ejection scroll, drop in half a glass of water, and chug. This is not a complex solution, it is a last resort, a very simple solution, a single universe-rending command word magically preserved and amplified to overload any local magical field. It will create a temporary, chaotic, but non-discriminatory anti-magic zone, giving you precisely 7.3 seconds to run like hell. Warning, side effects may include papier-mâché, localized reality bleeds, and parasitic butthole wormholes. As we said, only for use as an absolute last resort. X-out ejection scroll. When all else fails, fail safe. That brings us to what have you been putting in your brain? Science fiction, fantasy. Myq, what have you been sticking in your brain?
Thank you for asking. Most recently, I have read 2 books by Susanna Clarke. I read Piranesi, or Piranesi, as it may be pronounced. And then I read, or listened to, rather, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So those are the 2 most recent books I read. I also, not so long in the past, and is in front of me on a bookshelf that you can't see, have you heard of the book Antkind by Charlie Kaufman? I don't know that it properly fits into either sci-fi or fantasy, but it's definitely not reality. So I feel like it meets the description enough. So those are a few things, and certainly been watching Love is Blind. I don't know if that seems like pretty fictional as well. A fantastical world of a kind, but those are some to start us off.
I mean, that sounds fantastic. You did open or just crack the door on an ongoing debate which exists in sort of readerly realms, which is listening to a book the same as reading a book. Do you have a strong position on that one way or the other?
If by strong position do you mean a binary yes or no, this or that, the answer to that is a definitive no. But I do have a strong answer based in my study of linguistics, wherein I took a class called semantics, or it could be argued that I didn't, is a joke I tell. And in that class, we discussed the meaning of words such as a chair. What is a chair? How does a chair what is the definition? And in the class we came to, I'll cut to the end. It's a combination of the form and function, right? And so if you can sit on it, it's pretty often a chair, though you can sit on things that aren't chairs. But if it looks like a chair, then probably it's a chair, unless it's a hologram or something else. So like a beanbag chair is a chair that has enough of the function that it doesn't need the form. Whereas, a broken chair has enough of the form, even if you can't sit on it because it's missing the seat. So form and function is what makes something the thing that it is. And so what is reading? I think that the form of reading is looking with your eyes at words on a page. But I think that the function of reading is taking in the information or story as can happen via looking or listening. Because I think that there's like a world in which it would be ableist in a way to say, if you are blind, you have read no books. You cannot read a book except in like the most extreme, like hard-lined version of reading means looking. So I absolutely understand why people might say that in order to read, you have to be looking at the words. But I do think that the function of reading can be achieved enough that you can say, oh yeah, I read that book. Oh, I mean, I listened to it, but it's fine. It's totally fine. I say if I had to pick one or the other, which I don't, but I will for you, I will say that listening to an audiobook is more reading than it is not reading.
Well, yeah, and I think also if we can throw into the mix the invention of writing as a way to do what was then considered the best transmission of information was mouth to ear. That was the original reading. Reading is the beta version of listening, and so in some ways, audiobooks are just taking us back to the original and arguably better form of understanding information.
100% agreed. And I mean, you and I are both writers of various kinds. You have written books, by which I assume that might mean that you have typed. I mean, here, have you used a pen? Have you used a pencil? Have you literally written, or have you typed? Is typing writing? Yes. Is when you write a song, could it be not written down at all? Yes. Could you use sheet music? Yes. When you write a joke, could you do all of your writing on stage? Yes. So writing needn't be written and reading needn't be read.
Thank you. I've been wanting to talk about that on the podcast for a long time, which brings me to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell and Piranesi. What about them did you really engage with? Because if you've read two of this person's books in a row, I assume you liked the first one enough to read the next one.
Absolutely. Here's something that I really like. I don't want to spoil too much. Everyone pause and read both those books or listen, what have you. All right, we're back. Without giving away too much, I really like that I read Piranesi first, and I tried it like some months before I actually picked it up again, and like because many people I respect and like the taste of had recommended it to me, but I didn't get into it the first time, in part because it started so weird, and I was like, is it gonna be weird like this the whole time? And the answer is, I mean, yes and no. Like there is a way that it is weird in the way that almost every, great work of art, literature, certainly, like teaches you how to engage with it, teaches you like what, not only like who are the characters, what is the plot, but like how is the language of the piece, you know? And so I would say this book in particular was like almost jarring to begin with because of how different the world of the book seemed to be compared to our world. And I was like, like I feel on psychedelics sometimes, I was like, is it going to be like this forever? And then, once I bought in, I was like, I'll give it a shot. And then, it was like, I think that this, I think it's almost not a spoiler to say that things change, like it's not identical from beginning to end. I will say with Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, that book, I'll say explicitly, like, if you learn anything about it, you will learn that there are magicians in the world of the book. Like, you learn that in the first chapter, very early on. There are theoretical magicians, people who study magic and some believe that only like magic is only to be studied, in the way that any scientist like observe things, like the way that a physicist might observe a juggler, but does not have to learn how to juggle in order to discuss the physics of juggling. There are theoretical magicians in the world of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell who merely like observe and write about and think about and philosophize about magic. Meanwhile, there do end up being practical magicians as well. And so I love magic as a concept, as, especially when they're well written. That, I mean, the thing that I love, the characters are interesting, the plot for sure. I like did not know, like the title of the like revealed nothing. I was like, okay, we meet one of the characters early on. I'm like, we'll probably meet the other one later, but like I don't know who they will be to each other. So it's like mysterious the whole time. There are other characters, and I'm like, is that one this one? Is this important? Like, will this person be here at the end? Who knows? So I feel like it's an adventure, it's a mystery, and it's just a strongly built world, like a world that is much like our own, like exists in the 1800s of, a planet Earth, much like our own. I mean, I don't know if there was magicians in the 1800s. As far as I know, there weren't, but there was like Napoleon is a character in the book, like, actual wars that took place in our reality take place in this. So I like that there's a real nice melding of, our quote unquote real world and the fictional, magical realm of this book and or these books. I don't want to spoil anything.
Oh, ho, ho. I have read them, but it was a while ago. I should reread. What I did this week was I reread Babel, which is by R.F. Kuang and relates to our subgenre deep dive. It's an alternative reality, similar sort of historical period in which Britain's colonial supremacy is due to the technology of these magical silver bars, and the power arises from the tension between two words in different languages that have a similar but not the same meaning. And so, in order to have that, you need someone who's like very functionally bilingual. And as a result, Oxford and I think Cambridge as well gathers in foreign students into the heart of the empire. And it's sort of the theme is like the ways in which academia is complicit in building the technologies of empire and the ways in which you kind of, if you are a foreign student brought into and raised up in or raised up by empire and given status inside academia or any of these kind of institutes, what that makes of you. So that's lots of fun.
That does sound fun. May I also say one thing that just one scene that I will describe in as little detail as I can to avoid spoiling anything, but just a really like delightful part of one of the books. I won't even tell you what book. Someone is attempting to achieve something, and in order to do so, they determine that they must become insane. And so they do something in order that they might become insane. And then when they succeed, the way that they describe the insanity is so beautiful and hilarious. Just one element of it, they say this character was entirely certain that people either did or did not have little candles inside their head, but for the life of them, they could not remember which one of those was true. And that's bananas and beautiful. And I was like, I love that, a human being thought those things. Like those truly, like, I mean, obviously, art is as close to, if not exactly, the magic that we have that exists in our reality. A book didn't exist and then it did. A sentence didn't exist and then it did. Words, language, come into existence and then go from that person's brain, onto a page or into a machine and then into this person's brain. And then we're like, oh, now my brain does a different thing. This consciousness over here is now, in some ways, almost nearly forever shifted because of like some typing or speaking that happened elsewhere.
Yeah, the magic of language. My mum always used to, when I was little, say that, I should learn to read because spelling is magic. And that brings us to Trope on a Rope. Trope on a Rope, which is where we talk about a trope that we love or hate or love to hate, but we certainly notice it every time it comes into our view. My one, thematized to the Louvre heist, is the way in which heist stories always have someone who's thinking 3 steps ahead, and then you find out the reveal is that someone was thinking 6 steps ahead. And the way in which it was a particular kind of heist movie in the early 2000s where that went into the realm of the magical, where it's like, you cannot have anticipated this. Like, this plot is predicated on somebody knowing something they could not possibly have known and putting in place a plant from the age of 6. It's so that is my trope on a rope for this week. What's yours?
So I want to tell you a thing that a writer friend told me about heist stories that after I learned it, I now, whenever I see it, I'm like, that's really cool. It's sometimes in a heist movie, you'll have the scene of the people who are like, all right, here's how the plan is going to go. And my friend told me, he's like, if they tell you how the plan is going to go, it's not going to go like that. If you don't hear how the plan is going to go, it will go like that. It's almost always. And I was like, Of course. Perfect, beautiful, brilliant. Like sometimes they're describing it like as it's split screen happening, but at some point either that isn't what's happening or it's not exactly or it's going to be the other way. So that's just a cool thing to notice that I latch onto your trope on a rope. Mine is in the category of time travel. I love a time travel story. I love a time travel movie. It wasn't recent enough for me to mention it, but I'll mention it now. Ted Chiang, have you read, the short stories of one of which became the movie Arrival? My favorite story is the first one in the book Exhalation, and it's called The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate. And I think that one is like the most perfect, beautiful time travel story I've ever experienced. And it does not do the trope thing, which is the most iconic version of this that I will bring to us is from Looper. I remember there's a scene in Looper where future character, is talking to past character, having come back from future to past, and past character is like, "Wait, so time travel is real? How does it work?" And the future time travel guy is like, it doesn't matter. This is what we got to talk about. And it's like, I love that because, I mean, there are some time travel movies where they're like, this is how it works. You use this machine and it operates like this, but it's always, obviously, it's always made up. And eventually, like with the definition of words, if you look up any word in the dictionary and then you look up all those words, they're also in the dictionary. Eventually, you'll come to a cyclical, inescapable, near samsara like experience where you eventually have to just be like, look, you know what blue is, okay? That's blue. Like the words, like if you don't know what a kiwi tastes like, the words won't help you. You taste a kiwi, have an experience. So I love in a time travel movie or in kind of any movie where there's like a, I don't know, ghost in a machine type situation or a deus ex machina.
Well, if you could explain time travel well enough in your book, you would have invented time travel. So let's just all agree that it's magic.
Exactly. So, which is, early on, I used to love in my adult engagement with this kind of topic mentality. I loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I remember hearing an interview with Joss Whedon or reading it. I don't even remember if I read it or heard it. So, and look, heard is just all the letters of read with an H, which is hardly anything. And I remember Joss Whedon saying that in the first season, they sometimes had like Willow using a computer and she could like hack into, I don't know, the bank and the town and like the power grid. And he was basically like, yeah. And eventually she became, a witch who could do magic. And he's like, the whole time, what she did on the computer was magic. Like it was just, it functionally, like, we need this to happen in the story. Can a high schooler really type numbers and hack a grid? Maybe some of them can, but like for this one, it's the computer is magic. The technology is magic. We don't understand it. It's magic. So I like in Looper specifically and other times when they're just like, yeah. Don't even worry about it. We got a movie to do here.
Yeah. Here's how it needs to work for the plot.
Yeah.
And that brings us to our subgenre deep dive. Each week we go deep into a subgenre. Every week we announce it over on the Blue Sky. If you go over to the Blue Sky, I will announce the theme for the week and people give recommendations. So if you like this subgenre, go over there. You get a massive reading list equally over on my Patreon, free to access. If you want to subscribe over there, every week we do the call out and you just get really clever people giving recommendations because obviously we are limited in our time here, so we can't go as deep as we'd like. But if this is your subgenre, you can go as deep as you want. And that conversation is always a lot of fun. But words of power, as a fascinating subgenre where it's more prevalent in fantasy than it is in sci-fi, but not a huge amount less. Actually, it appears in science fiction a lot, and it comes from our shared history, particularly in Anglo myths and fairy tales, the original fantasy, in which knowing something's real name or giving your name could give someone power over you. Think about stories like Rumpelstiltskin, where having somebody's true name gives you the power of them. Knowing the true name of God, for example, extremely potentially powerful or maddening depending on the text that you're engaging with. So it's not surprising that you see it in a bunch of other places as it appears. We have a few things. Obviously, Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea quadrilogy, uses that to great effect, the idea that knowing something's true name gives you power over it. Then you have Language is a Virus from Outer Space by William S. Burroughs is a very good example. Do you have any recommendations, Mike, for words of power?
I mean, the Earthsea series was going to be my main one. Just like that was, I feel like one of the archetypical, prototypical, typical. I don't pronounce it in the typical way. Um, and like just to delve deeper into like the way that the magic in that world works, like I remember having a conversation with a Buddhist friend of mine, with whom like I'm learning about, you know, sort of Buddhist ontology, Buddhist epistemology, and like he also loves fairy tales, and we talk about, you know, fairy tale logic and as it connects with joke logic. But yeah, the Earthsea series, like the way in which the magic works is like, you know, kids at this magic school, some of them, they spend years learning the true name of everything, like every like molecule of water in the ocean, because, you know, the ocean over here has different water than the ocean over here. Every molecule has some kind of true name that everyone can theoretically learn if they're a magician. You gotta learn a lot of stuff. And it's fascinating, like, I mean, so yes, that is my number one recommendation. Ursula K. Le Guin is incredible, and I just love briefly how like much in reality, like in our life, like that the story of like Rumpelstiltskin can manifest as like itself like powerful for real. Like I have a good friend with whom like when we talk to each other, if one of us is going through a difficult situation, our term for like describing what's going on with us, we call it Rumpelstiltskinning. If we're like, let me just get this out, like the kind of like, hi, my name is Mike and I'm alcoholic. Like that is naming the challenge, naming the problem, and thereby decreasing the power of it, which is psychologically relevant. Like even as a comedian, I'm sure you've had this experience. I had one recently where before a show, someone came up to me and was like, "Are you one of the comedians?" And I said, "I am." I was like, "Oh, thanks for coming to the show. Nice to meet you. What's your name?" And she said, "Oh, you're not going to get me like that." As though if I had her name, then I could do a magic spell and, you know, get her in some way. And now, because she didn't give me her name, I talk about her on stage with respect to that ever since. I want to recommend a work by my friend Dylan Brody, who is a comedian and a storyteller and an author. And he wrote a book that I believe is called Merlyn that I read. And I read an advanced copy, so I'm not actually even sure if it is in the world yet, but it might be and it should be. But read anything that he has written, because he is a person who I feel like 5 years ago sent me in an email this, and it was the first time that I came across this concept, that he said, I believe jokes are powerful spells, and they only work if you say the words in the right order and the right rhythm. And that also connects to what you said about, you know, I think your mom saying about spelling. And do you know that there's like a famous Bruce Lee quote where he says a similar thing? He says, don't speak negatively about yourself, even as a joke. Your body doesn't know the difference. Words are energy and they cast spells. And that's why it's called spelling. Change the way you speak about yourself and you can change your life. And so, yeah, Ursula K. Le Guin and Dylan Brody are my top two, and Bruce Lee. Those are my recommendations.
Recommendations in the recommendations list from our beautiful listeners. We've got The Elder Scrolls against Skyrim, which is set during the Return of the Dragons, and they have the power to shout spells essentially to affect the world in their dragon language. And there are some dragonborn people who can also shout like the dragons do. People reference, of course, Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind, which obviously a lot of fun waiting for a sequel. And the original Myst book, related to the old video game of the same name, is the premise that there was an ancient civilization who could create new worlds by creating using precise language to describe the world they're looking for. So very much a coder's fantasy there. I'd like to recommend a science fiction before we move on, and then of course you can look it up yourself. A science fiction would be classic Star Trek, in which they have universal translators in their ears, but there is one episode in which they encounter a race who they cannot understand. They can understand the words that they're using, but the other civilization uses only sort of analogy and metaphor and references to old stories in order to communicate. So they position themselves in a conversation by reference to stories that our protagonist, in this case, Jean-Luc Picard, has no access to. And so they have to build a shared language of reference in the events that then take place to them, which is a lot of fun. If you have any, or I mean, there are a million recommendations at the tip of my tongue that I would love to go into, but of course, head into the comment section of my Patreon post or over on the blue sky at realms.unknown, and you can find out and add to that conversation. There might be your recommendation in the comments, and if there isn't, chuck it in yourself and go down that rabbit hole. And that brings us to the Minds of which is where we go into books or movies or television shows or back catalogue, things that we used to love, but now feel a little bit about. And then we talk about whether we can still recommend it, even with the caveat. Myq, have you got a recommendation?
I do. Do you know Garth Ennis, the author, comic book writer, and such? You might know one of his more popular works got turned into the TV show The Boys. Do you know that show? It's
Yes.
like about, superheroes gone amok, and I really do enjoy that show. And I have loved Garth Ennis's writing. I think maybe his first like sort of seminal work, if you can have a first seminal work, did I do that right? His like biggest, most popular, successful thing originally was called Preacher, which also became a TV show, but it was a comic book series about a preacher who also, I guess, related to our deep dive topic, uh developed like was I think something came crashing down from heaven and obliterated a church, and he was one of the only survivors, and he ended up being able to speak with the word of God, and when he spoke with the word of God, he could make people do the things that he wanted them to do, and then he went sort of on a hunt for God to hold God accountable for the things that God seemingly let happen, that he'd be like, hey, I don't think a good God would let that happen. I think it's really excellent. I think Garth Ennis is a brilliant writer. And I have a hard time engaging with his work now, in part because of how sometimes cartoonishly and sometimes less cartoonishly. I mean, it's good that it is a cartoon, but violent and gory. I like an action movie like a John Wick or like a Nicolas Cage type thing where it's kind of like violence as ballet, like a choreographed dance. But like I don't love gore in horror. I don't love being scared. I don't love being grossed out. And so sometimes now when I revisit or visit new Garth Ennis works, they are a little much for my more, I don't want to say evolved. I am a different person, and I have greater sensitivity to violence and gore. But I think that, when it's accompanied by a great story, as often Garth Ennis stories are, like, like a Get Out. Like I'll watch Get Out even though I don't want to be scared, even though I don't want to be, terrified and grossed out, because I'm like, the story, like it serves the story, so I can do it, but I'm a little more about it in the form that these Garth Ennis books and series sometimes take.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the original comic books of The Boys because I think I picked them up having seen a couple of episodes of the television show, which I thought was very well done, particularly in that first season. And they were over the line for me in terms of what makes me happy to engage with. In terms of all of the characters were more grotesque, and all of the engagements that they had with one another were more sort of cynically painted, and that kind of, I think I am perhaps losing my shell in some ways. In some ways, as I grow up, I become more tough, and in some ways, when I encounter media that's really cynical, uh, it has to be so well written to rise above that for me. I'm navigating that with Grimdark at the moment, with Grimdark, where it crosses over into really satisfying competence porn, which we discussed a few weeks ago, where it's like, oh, they're getting everything done, but they're sort of awful people. And the underlying implication is that in order to get things done, you have to have no morals. You have to be willing to do awful things. And I can't go along with that anymore. I need at least one character who is good and not an idiot, where, morality, perhaps they're not engaging in this fight, perhaps they're not equipped for this fight, but their morality cannot be like a punchline or a shorthand for incompetence or an unwillingness to engage with the real world. Because I have to believe, in order to get on with my day, I have to believe that you can be a good person and get things done in the world.
Yeah, I second that. I'll also say, I mean, so many things are relative. Like getting things done is such a, a broad thing. Like some things needn't be done, like some things will be done, regardless of whether a person does them in a specific way or not. And like some things, if in order to do something, you're like, oh, to save billions of people, we have to kill millions of people. Like, I'm glad I'm not the person in charge of that decision, be it like in, I don't know, the graphic novel Watchmen or something, like, and I understand why these are like, the trolley problem makes sense to ask as a question. And I can also understand why, like, if somebody was like, but wouldn't you, to save people, do this awful thing? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to. I'm glad I don't have to. And sometimes I resonate with the Zen, I don't know if it's a koan or the Zen adjacent concept of like, don't just do something, sit there.
And that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Realms Unknown. For your call to action, brave adventurer, why not take Myq's lead and seek out some of Susanna Clarke's work, such as Piranesi or Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell? Read them with your eyes, your ears, your mind, or your soul, or all of the above. Of course, for our Words of Power subgenre deep dive, if you have not already encountered Ursula K. Le Guin's Books of Earthsea series, what are you doing? Seek them out immediately. They are so good and so influential and so impactful. It's like listening to Mozart for the first time. You're like, this is everywhere, but it's everywhere because she done it. Firm recommendation from me and Myq this week. As Myq's comedian friend Dylan Brody says, jokes or spells, words in the right place, in the right order, with the right rhythm. Remember to check out his fantasy book, Merlyn's Mistake, which is coming sometime soon, if not out already. Myq, what can people do to support you, and where can they find you in the world?
Thank you for asking. You are very generous. I will say, if you only remember one thing, if you only know one thing from what I say, I have a new comedy special, my first hour-long special in over a decade, coming out November 19th, 2025. If it's before then, you can go on YouTube and click the notify me button. If it's after then, you can go on and watch it immediately. It's free. It should be collaboration between my YouTube channel and Blonde Medicine, my production company that I'm working with. It'll be on both of our YouTube channels simultaneously. And it is called Rini. The show is called Rini. It was created by myself and my girlfriend, whose name is Rini. It is about our relationship. And I'm super proud of it and happy with it and excited to get it into the world. So watch Rini on YouTube starting in November of 2025 or anytime into the future, as long as the internet exists. And then, of course, do follow me at Myq Kaplan, all of the places. Look for the weird spelling of my name, MYQ KAPLAN. I have a Substack, myqkaplan.substack.com. I have various social media. I have a website. I have my dates at my website or at punchup.live/Myq Kaplan. I've got a book. I've got all manner of things. If you put my name wherever you'd like to find things that I do, I bet you will.
Wonderful news. And you can find my book, A Passion for Passion, where all good books are sold. Although if you listen to the special episode of Realms Unknown, you'll know that I'm not necessarily getting the money from any book you purchase. So if you do want to buy the book, please buy it from anywhere. The audiobook, the money comes to me. And therefore, audiobook listening is better than reading. The audiobook is available all over the place. And also, if you do buy the book but feel weird about having bought it and the money not going to me, go subscribe over at my Patreon, patreon.com/Alice Fraser. I run 3 writers' meetings a week and 1 salon where we talk about interesting ideas. So come along and have a nice time. They're in Zoom rooms. It's really genuinely a good time and a highlight of my week. This is a Bugle podcast and Alice Fraser production. Your editor is Ped Hunter. Your executive producer is Chris Skinner. I'll talk to you again next week.